These are two people, the two dots are people, and the line that connects them is a social relationship between the two. And here's our connection of the four people, and now we have other pairs of individuals around them. And in fact, all these people are interconnected to each other through relationships of marriage and family and friendship and working and so forth. Social networks are intricate things of beauty, and they are so elaborate and so complex and so ubiquitous, in fact, that one has to ask a certain fundamental set of questions. I mean, you have to wonder what purpose they serve. Why are we embedded in social networks? How do we form them? Why do we form them? And how do they operate? How do they affect our lives? Now, the first topic that we tackled along with my collaborator, James Fowler, my long-term collaborator, was not death, actually, but obesity. So this is one of the first images that we drew to study this phenomenon. Every dot is a person. Every line connecting them is a relationship between the two people. Different kinds of relationships, friendship connections, sibling connections, spousal connections, co-worker connections, and so forth. Here we make the dot size proportional to people's body mass index. So bigger dots are bigger people. And in addition, we color the dots yellow if people are properly obese. If their BMI is above 30, they get a yellow color as well. And if you look at this network, you can probably discern that there are clusters of obese and non-obese individuals within the network, although the complexity is still very high, and it's not entirely obvious what's going on. Nevertheless, a number of questions are begged by this clustering. First of all, how much clustering is there? Second, is there more clustering than due to chance? Third, how big are the clusters? And fourth, and most interestingly, what might cause the clusters? What are the kinds of social and biological processes that give rise to this phenomena of clustering within these networks? And what we were able to conclude is the following. On the y-axis, we show the increase in the probability that a person is obese given that a social contact of theirs is obese. And on the x-axis, we show the degrees of separation between the two people, or the two kinds of people we're speaking about. And the purple bar on the far left says that if your friend is obese, your probability of being obese is 45% higher. And if your friend's friend, in the kind of reddish color, is obese, your probability of being obese is 25% higher. And if your friend's friend's friend is obese, your probability of being obese is 10% higher. It's only when we get to your friends, 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 that there's no longer a relationship between that person's body size and your body size. Many phenomena are like this. So attributes of your life, what you think, what you feel, what you look like, are related to the analogous attributes of people that are 1, 2, 3 degrees of separation from you, and then it dissipates. So if I know stuff about people who are your friends' friends' friends, if you want to think about this from a kind of information theory point of view, if I know stuff about your friends' friends' friends, I'm better able to know the same kind of stuff about you. Now, when this paper was published in the New England Journal in 2007, headline writers had a field day. In the United States, a typical headline was, packing it on, blame your fat friends. Now, the Brits, on the other hand, had headlines that said, are your friends gaining weight? Perhaps you are to blame. Which I found a very telling contrast between kind of the American and British way of seeing the world. This network moves. Things flow within it. It's resistant to injury. A person can die and the network will anneal and close up around itself. It has a kind of survival, a kind of totality that transcends the individuals. It coheres and it endures across time. And so I came to see this network as a kind of a living thing, as a kind of superorganism, a kind of human superorganism that can be dissected and understood in a completely different way than the kinds of conventional ways we think about individuals. Human social networks always look strikingly similar. Whenever they have been mapped, human social networks, all the pictures I've showed you, kind of look like this. But they never look like this. Why not? Why don't we form human social networks that look like a regular lattice? I mean, why don't we create this kind of phenomenon and instead we create the other kind of phenomenon? Notice that in this network, every position is isomorphic with every other position. Every position is the same as every other position. Everyone has 8 friends. Everyone's friends know each other equally. If you wrap this meshwork around a sphere, there would be no middle or edge. Everyone would occupy exactly the same position. But in a real human social network, we all have different positions, it turns out. So here, if you look at this image and you compare node B in the upper left to node D in the far right, those people have different numbers of friends. We're all used to thinking of that. B has 4 friends and D has 6 friends. That's not too surprising. Some of us have many friends, some of us have none. It varies. But there are other kinds of structural features that can vary as well. Look at nodes C and D. Both C and D have 6 friends. If you talk to them, how many friends you have, that would be the extent of their understanding, perhaps, of their location in the social network. But we now, with this bird's eye view, can see that C and D occupy completely different locations, because different positions confer different advantages in different circumstances. Now compare A and B. A and B both have 4 friends, but A's friends all know each other, by and large, and B's friends do not. So a friend of A's is right back a friend of A's. And a friend of B's is someone else in the network, more distant. Who would you rather be if you were trying to hunt a mastodon? You got to get a group of people together and go kill something. A. All your buddies know each other, they work together, they're friends of friends, let's go kill the damn thing. Who would you rather be if you were trying to find a mastodon? B. Because if A's friends are all friends with each other, do you know where the mastodon is? No, do you know where the mastodon is? Everybody, you're right back to the beginning guy. So whereas B allows you to tap more distant regions within the network. This is not too surprising. Some of us are born shy, some of us are born gregarious, and about half that variation is explained by your genes. But more surprisingly, we also find that your transitivity is about 47% explained by your genes. This is a very bizarre result. This means that whether or not your friends know each other depends on your genes. So if you have Betty, Sue, and Jane in a room, whether Sue knows Jane depends on Betty's genes. Not on Sue's genes or on Jane's genes, but on Betty's genes. And so what we think this means is that people vary in their tendency to introduce their friends to each other. Some of us knit the networks around us. We're inclined to do that partially genetically, and others of us do not, in a kind of worlds apart theory. We keep all our friends, separate. We don't allow our work life to mix with our personal life and so forth. Why do we have a vast fabric of humanity? How does it help us? Well, I would argue that networks have value, and in fact, they can be understood as a kind of social capital. New properties emerge because of the connections, because of the ties between people, not necessarily because of the people themselves. And in fact, it is the ties between people that can make the whole greater than the sum of its parts, can give and confer upon groups attributes which the individuals do not have, and attributes that vary across groups depending on the pattern of the ties. So a superorganism is a collection of individuals that can act in concert to produce properties that do not inhere in the individuals and that can only be understood by studying the collective. I think that understanding social networks and how they form and operate can shed light not just on health and emotions, but on other phenomena such as warfare, crime, economic outcomes, and political movements as well. But overall, we form social networks because the benefits of a connected life outweigh the costs. Look, if I was always violent towards you, or infected you with germs, or made you sad, or gave you misinformation, you would cut the ties to me and the network would disintegrate. So the spread of good and desirable properties is required to nourish and sustain the network. And the network is in turn required for good and valuable things like love and affection and altruism and ideas to spread through the network. So there's a very fundamental and deep connection between social networks and goodness. And in fact, the reason we form social networks is fundamentally so as to encourage a kind of pro-social and positive experience in our lives. Thank you.